Welcome to episode 85 of Lucretius Today. I'm your host Cassius, and together with my panelists from the EpicureanFriends.com forum, we'll walk you through the 6 books of Lucretius's poem, and we'll discuss how Epicurean philosophy can apply to you today. We encourage you to study Epicurus for yourself, and we suggest the best place to start is the book Epicurus and His Philosophy by Canadian professor Norman DeWitt. For anyone who is not familiar with our podcast, please visit EpicureanFriends.com, where you'll find our goals and our ground rules. If you have any questions about those or anything about the podcast, please be sure to contact us at the forum for more information. In this episode 85, we'll read approximately Latin lines 340 through 417 as we continue further into Book 6. We'll discuss thunder, lightning, and the eternal question of why the gods strike their own temples with thunderbolts. Now let's join Martin reading today's text.
And lastly, the greater the distance is from whence a body descends, its swiftness in proportion increases. It still gathers strength as it moves, grows more violent, and the blow is the heavier when it falls. For all its seeds are driven down by that length of violence to one point, and unite all their powers in the same motion. Or perhaps they carry with them other seeds in their passage through the air, which beat them on and keep them steady in their descent. The lightning makes its way and passes through bodies that are rare, and leaves them safe and unhurt. But other bodies it rends asunder, because its fiery seed strikes through their solid corpuscles which hold them together. And therefore it easily dissolves brass and gold, because it consists of exceeding small and smooth particles, which work themselves without difficulty into the very principles, and in an instant melt the whole contexture, and loosen the ties and bonds by which they were secured. And in autumn, and when the flowery season of the spring displays its beauty, then the high palaces of heaven, with all its shining stars, and the whole earth are shaken most with thunder. For in the winter there wants fire, and in summer there is no supply of wind, nor will the clouds grow thin in too much heat. But in the middle quarters of the year all things occur to make the thunder roar. Those seasons are made up of heat and cold blended together. Of both these is formed the thunder, that so these jarring elements may raise the greater combustions, and the tormented air tossed with more confusion by the strokes of wind and fire. For the end of winter and the beginning of summer makes the spring, and then the heat and cold, two enemies so opposite, most needs engage, and when they meet and mix, raise strange confusions in the air. And then the end of summer and the beginning of winter bring on the autumn. Now the retiring heat and coming cold engage again. These are the times, we say, when the elements go forth to war. Where is the wonder if loud thunders roar in seasons such as these, and dreadful tempests rattle in the sky, since the elements rage in every way with doubtful war, on one side fire, on the other furious winds mingled with rain. From hence you must collect the true principle of thunder, and discover how it works, and sends abroad its fires. For 'tis in vain to look back into old Tuscan legends, and from thence inquire into the secret purposes of the gods, from what quarters of the heavens the lightning flies, and to what part it points its forked beams, and how it pierces through the walls of houses, and having spent its rage it finds a passage out, and what evil it portends by flashing from the sky. For if great Jupiter and the rest of the gods delight to shake the shining battlements of heaven with horrid noise, and throw about these fires as please themselves, why are not those shot through who love to act flagitious crimes, and why their hearts not struck with fiery bolts, as dreadful monuments to future times? Why rather are the good and innocent scorched with these blasts, and tortured in the flames, and caught up in these whirlwinds of the air, and in the fire consumed? And why do they spend their shafts on solitary places, and fatigue themselves in vain? Is it to exercise their arms to try their strength, or why do they permit their father's bolts to be blunted against the bare earth? Why does he suffer this himself, and not rather reserve his stores to blast his enemies? Why does not Jove vouchsafe to roar with thunder, and smite the earth with his bolts in a clear sky? When the clouds spread over the heavens, does he descend within them in order to be nearer and to throw his darts with a surer aim? Why does he send his fires upon the sea? Why does he chastise the waves, the wide ocean, or the plains covered with water? Besides, if he would have us avoid the stroke of these thunderbolts, why does he not contrive what we may seem them as they fly? If he resolves to blast us with his fire before we are aware, Why does he first flash out his lightning from that quarter whence his bolts are to be discharged, that we may avoid them? Why does he give us notice by raising darkness, noises, and murmurs in the air? And then how think you that he is able to cast so many darts in many various places at once? Will you offer to say that is never done, and insist there are never more darts flying about at the same time? It is certain that numbers of them are thrown together, and it cannot be otherwise, for as the rain and showers fall upon many countries at once, so many strokes of thunder are discharged at the same time. In the last place, why does he with his deadly thunder beat down the sacred temples of the other gods, and the stately fabrics devoted to himself? Why does he dash to pieces the curious statues of the other deities, and destroy with furious strokes the honors offered to his own images? Why does he level his shafts at lofty places? For we discover many traces of this fire upon the tops of highest mountains.
Okay, Martin, thank you for reading that for us today. We have got some interesting material to talk about. We've been able to look into the meteorological aspects of things and come up with a very profound religious observation about how the gods must or must not operate. And we want to be sure we give that the attention it deserves when we get to it in the discussion. Actually, however, we probably need to drop back to last week for at least a few minutes, because we finished our detailed discussion of last week's text all the way back, at, if my note is correct, at around line 246. So let's just quickly look back at the passages beginning 246 to see if there's anything else that we'd like to bring out before we move on to today's text. And to give you guys time to get to that point, one thing I wanted to point out is something I made note of in the forum last night, that one of the first things that Don read last week was about the prodigious weight of the clouds. And I happened to just come across a reference to someone talking about that very same issue and looked up the weight of the clouds on the U.S. Geological Survey. And it appears that clouds can have a very prodigious weight indeed, and can weigh as much as 500 or more tons, according to what the U.S. Geological Survey has to say. I suspect Martin will have some clarifying comments on exactly what that means about the mass or whatever of clouds, but it certainly never occurred to me that they could have so much mass in them as they apparently do. I guess that's the mass of the water vapor and so forth. But certainly when you start thinking about if that much weight is involved in a cloud, it really is counterintuitive how they stay up in the air. And possibly that's an observation that the Epicureans were pretty good at making, if it's counterintuitive. So Martin, what do you think about mass of clouds?
I mean, this is just a number which is then made up by the volume. No? So if a cloud is a cubic kilometer in volume, then it can easily have that weight. No?
And it stays in the air just because it is spread out over such an area, or?
Yeah, because the small droplets which are there, they are kept because they cannot accelerate down, because the friction makes them immediately stop. No? So it's like if you drop something which is not too dense into honey, it will not sink. It will just stay there, even though it's heavier than honey. It will take ages until it sinks down. And if there are small particles, they behave the same way in air. No? There's also the same with why once the aerosol of the virus is formed, no? It stays for quite a while in the air.
Okay. Well, I just thought that was worthy of note as something that, like I say, is kind of counterintuitive to realize that it could be that heavy, and that Lucretius would have thought of that, or Epicurus would have thought of that to make note of it. So that's one thing I wanted to observe from last week. And like I say, I think we stopped around section 246 and 256. So let's glance at those and see if we have anything else we want to pull out. I think we were still talking in those lines basically about just the clouds themselves. I see there's some memorable lines in there, like the clouds thicken in every way over all the heavens, as if the whole mass of darkness had left the shades of hell and fill the spacious hollows of the sky. That might be more poetry than really something that's profound philosophy. So let's scan over those and see if there's anything else we want to bring out before we get to today's text. You guys see anything?
No, just the thing about the ball of lead melts in its course, and I think we covered that last week.
Okay, all right.
So do we have more meteorology after today's episode too?
Uh-huh.
Oh, Lord.
We do, unfortunately. But like I say, this little break on the gods, why do they waste their thunderbolts? I think that gives us a pretty
that could be fun. That could be fun
thing to deal with. So, but I was telling Martin earlier on in the book, we waded through some pretty intense, deep material about atoms, and basically we're able to keep going through on schedule. So I hate to get too far off of the list here.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. You've dedicated to going through the entire poem, so it's not like we can you can skip lines 400 through 900 and
right.
You can read that on your own. Yeah, no. I fully agree. You need to take it as it comes.
Yeah. So I'm looking now at 309 through 335, and
the only other thing I can think of is, as we work through all the meteorology, to think if there's any other points of the philosophy that we can somehow shoehorn in addition to talking about the weather.
Yeah, kind of like we did last week.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't see anything worse to talk about for the remaining paragraphs there.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll just kind of narrate and we'll just move on to days. Okay. So it looks like paragraphs 300 through 350 or 340 or so are basically the same material we've been covering over with just more detail about the way the clouds work. And so that brings us to today's material that begins around 340.
Yep, and it's just a good example of Lucretius not letting any detail go unnoticed. He's into the nitty-gritty details on the thunder and the lightning in this section, so his powers of observation are right there.
Right. And we're analyzing in line 340 I guess we're talking about lightning bolts right now, and how the seeds of the lightning bolts are pushed down and against each other and keep them steady in their descent.
So is he talking about velocity there and things fall faster the longer distance they have? Am I reading that correctly? It seems like the greater the distance is from whence a body descends. It sounds like if you threw a thunderbolt from 3 feet off the ground, it wouldn't go very fast, but it's falling from the vault of the heavens, so that's why it's so fast whenever it comes down. Am I reading that correctly? Does anybody else get that sort of interpretation?
So it seems he's expressing this behavior of masses when we let them fall, the free fall near the surface of the earth. No?
That's how I was taking it, and because he's talking about the blow is heavier when it falls, if it falls from a greater height, it sounds like. So maybe that's why he thinks the thunderbolts do such damage, maybe, or one of the reasons, I should say, one of the possible reasons.
Yeah, and the thing is, but he is not clear enough on this, and the law was not yet known. No? So what is correct is rather something what is very similar, and qualitatively you cannot distinguish it empirically. No? So the greater the distance is, the more energy is in the separation of charges. No? And this one will show up as voltage, and that combination of that separated charge times the voltage is then the energy. So that means, but this is linear, no? So it goes linear with height, no? And so I mean, I don't think he could really make these good measurements. So it's something where by chance I think his theory is correct.
Right. And do I remember correctly that a lot of thunderbolts that quote unquote hit the earth actually travel from the earth to the cloud instead of the other way around? I vaguely remember hearing that in the past, and I don't know whether that's true or not.
I mean, that depends. So if there's the ions formed in that path, no, the positive ions will travel through one end, and the negative ions along with the electrons to the other. So that means of course, in some way it starts at one end, and that is where probably the breakdown strength at that portion is exceeded, and then from there it will just move on. And it could be, I couldn't tell for sure now which is more likely or more often, but it's very well conceivable that sometimes it goes from the earth to the top and sometimes from top to the earth. I don't think we can see it because this one should move too fast that we can see it with the eye. But
exactly.
But maybe with what we have now, with these extremely fast cameras, we might be able to catch that.
And not to really beat the dead horse on the lightning bolts, but Martin, help me get less confused on this issue of, there's the scientific experiment about everything falling through a vacuum at the same speed. Is that Galileo, or it's not Newton, it's Galileo, right?
That's Galileo.
So in a vacuum, the feather and the ball of lead will fall at this, will hit the bottom at the same time. But is there not some truth to this about if some body at like the edge of space falls towards the Earth, it really is going to increase in speed, isn't it?
This one you can see when you see the experiment in the vacuum. You see the same thing. Eh? So when you just drop them, they basically at speed 0, and then they accelerate continuously, both the feather and the weight. No? So they accelerate continuously, and so for a short distance, which we normally have compared to the size of the Earth, so from several meters above ground to close to the ground, the acceleration is essentially constant, and that means the speed increases linearly, and the distance traveled goes then with the square of the time.
Okay, that explains my confusion, because I wasn't thinking about the fact that the feather is going to accelerate as it falls, just like the ball of lead is, even through the vacuum, is what you're saying.
It's amazing to watch those videos of the feather and the balls dropping at the same rate in the vacuum. I think I vaguely remember seeing something that they did that experiment on the moon or something. One of the astronauts took like 2 objects to drop on the moon, and it was like that.
Yeah, it's completely counterintuitive. No? So
exactly.
It feels weird to see that.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So no wonder that it took so long to figure out these laws.
Yeah, because in a normal observation, you're dealing with air pressure and air resistance and all those sort of things. So that's why we don't experience it as a regular everyday thing. But seeing it, filmed is just it's a little odd.
Okay, we got a couple of more paragraphs before we get to the pleasure of attacking false religion again. So let's dive into 357 and 379. 357 is about basically the pretty good observation about how the harshest weather occurs at the change of seasons. It looks like is what it's mostly talking about, when the cold season and the hot seasons give way to each other.
But it depends where you are.
Mm-hmm.
So in Central in Central Europe, it's rather that in summer we have the most thunderstorms, and in Thailand it's obvious during the wet season, which is then corresponds from our spring through to our autumn. But they don't have these seasons. It's just the wet season then there.
I would be interested to look at, and I do not know what the weather patterns are like in Greece and Italy, where both Epicurus and Lucretius would have been writing.
Like in summer there it's fairly dry, and then in winter they have a lot of rain. And I think, I'm not sure about it, but I guess then it fits then here that in the transition they have most of the thunderstorms. Mm-hmm. Because I think you need that heat to facilitate the thunderstorm, so that things are rising fast enough that you have separation of charges. So that's why I guess in winter it's rather rare to have thunderstorms.
That makes sense.
And I believe that's what he's pretty much saying there. Mm-hmm. Something about in the summer there's no supply of wind, nor will the clouds grow thin in too much heat. A lot of poetry going on, I think, in that section.
Oh yeah, he's a wordsmith.
Yeah, but this is, nor will the clouds grow thin in too much heat. This is a bit weird because in summer there are not many clouds in the Mediterranean area, and they will evaporate eventually. So they do grow thin in summer. No?
But in the middle quarters of the year, all things occur to make the thunder roar. They are made up of heat and cold blended together. I guess, at least in my area of the country, that's pretty much what I see. We have the hurricane season in the fall, and lots of things go on in the spring. But in the heat of the summer and then the cold of the winter, things are more mild, or at least not as rambunctious, I guess. Okay, so therefore we have reached the point that from hence we must collect the true principles of thunder and discover how it works and sends abroad its fires. For it's vain to look back into the old Tuscan legends and from thence inquire into the secret purposes of the gods, and from what quarter of heavens the lightning flies, and to what part it points its forked beams. So I guess they used to do that kind of divination to kind of think about where the lightning was coming from and where it was going to.
Yeah, I remember him mentioning that in some earlier passages too, that you would, look at the sky and divide it up into sections and, well, the lightning started here and went to here. That means X, Y, Z.
It's more easy for me to think about doing that at night when you're kind of looking at the constellations and kind of doing some kind of astrology things. But I guess even in the daytime, you certainly can do north, south, east, west, and stuff like that.
You could even technically have some sort of, I don't know whether they did this, but you could have some sort of, rope grid that you could hold up to the sky and look through it and make things easier for you to figure out where things were coming from and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And if your life depended on getting the divinations right for the king, you would be sure to memorize those areas of the sky too. So,
or at least make a pretty good routine of looking like you understand.
Exactly.
Well, the rest of what we're talking about today is a lot of good material, and it kind of reminds me of the kind of thing that would have been related to the famous riddle of Epicurus that people talk about all the time about why the gods do this, that, or the other, or why they don't do this, that, or the other. This is a well-written, well-crafted section on what exactly are the gods supposed to be doing with their Thunderbolts, since it really makes no sense to think that they are tools of the gods given the way they counterintuitively are used or show themselves to us.
Oh yeah, this is a great section. This is a very enjoyable section.
For if Jupiter and the rest of the gods delight to shake the shining battlements of heaven with horrid noise and throw about these fires as please themselves, why are not those shot through who love to act flagitious crimes? And why are their hearts not struck with fiery bolts as dreadful monuments to future times? Why rather are the good and the innocent scorched with these blasts and tortured in the flames and caught up in these whirlwinds in the air and in the fire consumed? You could see somebody getting worked up.
Testify, Brother Cassius. Testify.
That's exactly right. Why do you send those lightning bolts to hit the good people instead of the bad people? Why are you wasting your time and ours both sending your lightning bolts against the people you should be helping?
This is just an ancient argument of, why bad things happen to good people,
Yeah.
It's like that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
If we see this happening and we believe in the gods, why would the gods do this to us? I'm saying, well, there aren't any, but,
Yeah, these paragraphs kind of break down like that because I think you're right. This one would be why do bad things happen to good people? And then the next one is why do they waste their time, basically?
Right. They're saying, or do the gods have target practice? Do the gods just exercise their arms? What's going on?
A lot of sarcasm there in the exercising their arms and trying their strength.
And I could see this kind of thing. I mean, it's obviously Lucretius's words, but I could see Epicurus going down this path just from reading some of his other, works, especially some of the on nature things that have been translated from Herculaneum, just that sort of, biting little sarcasm.
Yeah, this is not exactly the kind of argument that's calculated to win friends and influence people among the religious locals who are dedicated to their idea of gods, because it's kind of rubbing it in. But, there's a time and a place for everything and a time and a place to rub it in, apparently, according to Epicurus.
Apparently.
Okay, Martin, don't let us leave you out of this conversation. We need your input into the religious ramifications of this. Anything yet?
Yeah, I mean, I basically agree what you say. It's just sarcasm about this. So, I mean, if you pretty sure about that, it's a natural explanation of those. There are plenty of ways to make fun out of these superstitions which think otherwise.
Right. That's one of the continuing themes of things we touch on almost every episode. It's that some people are going to find these particular arguments extremely interesting and extremely motivating to think about. And then some of them are going to say, well, why are you wasting my time talking about these things? It's so ridiculous to even think about them. So I can't move on past that without saying that I've always thought that Epicurus was intending to pay at least as much attention to the normal, everyday, common person as he was the academics. Of course, at that time, everybody presumably held these positions that the gods were doing these things. But I suspect even today he would be spending time on both sets of people. And so why are they wasting their times? And then why does Job vouchsafe to roar with thunder and smite the earth with his bolts in a clear sky? Mm-hmm. The clear sky part of it. Martin, do we have thunder and lightning in clear sky, or is that something we just hear from a distant area where there are clouds?
Yeah, exactly. Because in the clear sky, there's nothing what would separate the chart. So that is unlikely that you have it originating in clear sky. No? But you can see it from far away, possibly.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right.
And I like this next one. When the clouds spread over the heavens, does he descend within them in order to be nearer and throw his darts with a surer aim? I think that's a really biting one right there.
That's a good one there.
Especially if one sees through the clouds.
Yeah,
exactly. It's like
that's why they rotate down toward the earth so he can get closer and he can make sure that he throws his lightning exactly where he wants to throw it, which of course is contradicts what we've just been observing, that he does not do that.
Exactly.
And then why does he send his fires upon the sea? Why does he chastise the waves, the wide oceans, or the plains covered with water? I guess lightning bolts strike the ocean again, Martin.
Oh, sure.
Of course. Where we have that charge separation and where then the thunderstorm sets off. I mean, most of this will probably end up in the sea, because we are more than half is covered with water.
Well, one of the background premises that I think we're all assuming without having spoken so far is that when the charge builds up, it often, or I guess it must not always, but it often discharges itself at a high point, which presumably is closer to the clouds, like a steeple or a tree or mountaintop maybe. But obviously,
like a steeple, for example.
Exactly. Especially those steeples that are always ringing those bells and making people irritated. But what about the ocean? How would it pick out a place on the ocean to discharge itself, Martin? Any particular reason it would do it one place and not another?
Yeah, I mean, there you have the waves, and then just by chance where this dielectric breakdown starts. So it's more likely to hit the top of the crest of a wave than hit in the bottom, but it's not too much of a difference. So there it will really appear quite randomly, probably in the area where that thunderstorm is, without any preference for something, because there are no particular height differences, except that you have these crests of waves.
And I think this points out, too, in some ways, the whole idea of selective attention, too, where people will see a lightning bolt hit what they think is an appropriate target and concentrate on that and just sort of ignore all the other lightning bolts that have hit things that are not connected with the thing that they want to talk about. So it's like, oh, see, that person was punished because they got hit by a lightning bolt, or that a temple was built on the wrong day of the week and the gods were displeased. And so then you just, well, what about that one over there that hit the other temple, last week? Well, we're not going to talk about that one. But look at this one over here.
Yep.
Yeah, and the other one mentioned at an earlier session already. Most lightnings actually go from cloud to cloud, where the original charge separation is.
The Olympian gods were always fighting amongst themselves. So yes,
that's right. That's exactly right.
That's missing here in the Lucretius.
Exactly. He could have brought that one in.
As we go through this might be one of the most sarcastic, biting sections of the whole poem. I'd have to think about whether there are others. I know there are others that have a similar sense of sarcasm, but this one is really sarcastic.
This is concentrated.
Especially it goes on paragraph by paragraph.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. He got fired up on this one, so.
And the next one, he's just as fired up because he goes back and forth. And first of all, he suggests, well, if God wants us to avoid the stroke of his thunderbolts, why doesn't he give us some warning? Why doesn't he contrive that we may see them as they fly? So he takes first the possibility that, well, God may be wanting us to, at least the good people maybe, to avoid the thunderstrokes, but he doesn't give anybody any warning. On the other hand, if he's resolving to blast us with his fire before we know it, why does he first flash out his lightning from that quarter and whence his bolts to be discharged that we may avoid him? So why does he give us notice by raising darkness, noises, and murmurs in the air if he's trying to destroy us? So either way, it doesn't make sense that this is a focused, intelligent activity that is going on.
Yeah, and then he goes right into the next paragraph. It's like he's flying things around all at the all over the place. How can he be in multiple places at once? And if he's like, you have one person, one god throwing these, how can he be in multiple places at once? And
right, and he's anticipating responses as if he's really just arguing with these people. Will you offer to say that this is never done and insist that there are never more darts flying about at the same time? It's certain that the numbers of them are thrown together and cannot be otherwise, for as the rain and showers fall upon many countries at once, so many strokes of thunder are discharged at the same time. So he's really just arguing with these people at that point. And then as we come to the end, we're going to come to the coup de grace. My French is not very good, but the coup de grace of the argument. Why does he destroy his own temples and the temples of his friends, the other gods, and the stately fabrics devoted to himself? Why does he dash to pieces the curious statues of the other deities and destroy with furious strokes the honors offered to his own images? Why does he level his shafts at lofty places? For we discover many traces of his fire upon the tops of highest mountains. So
he's mad at the mountains. He's mad at his own temples. He's mad at his other deities. He's just mad at everybody.
You get the impression that they had a regular problem back in the ancient world with these temples being destroyed by lightning. I guess that's probably true.
I guess they would have been the highest points. I mean, look at the Acropolis in Athens. It's the highest point in the entire city. So if you're going to get lightning storms, it's going to get hit all the time. And in any other low-lying place, the temple's going to be the highest point in that particular community. And so chances are, But yeah, this section's fun. This is just like, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this?
Like I say, it does evoke in my mind a similar attitude, at least to the riddle of Epicurus that is preserved in one of the church fathers, but which we don't have the original version of.
This is like Lucretian stand-up.
Right, it is. It is. And so, Don, you'll be happy to know that in the next section for next week, we return to meteorological phenomena.
Thank heavens.
Get into the winds and presumably tornadoes and things like that. But I'm sorry. As we started today, we were talking about that we wanted to cover a couple of words that might not be clear in what was discussed today. One, we even laughed about one being so clearly needing it. What was that?
Flagitious?
Yeah, okay, flagitious could be it. And you looked that up and found it meant what, Don?
Yeah, I just had criminal or villainous, and some synonyms are immoral and wrong, and
so that's the group
ungodly. So that's the group of people. Why don't you fling thunderbolts at the criminals and the ones that have bad morals and they're doing wrong things and are ungodly?
Right.
Leave us alone.
Because of course that's presumably the most obvious interpretation that these supernaturally religious people are taking, is that the gods are punishing somebody by sending these storms and sending these lightning bolts and destroying things. So if they're taking the trouble to do that, why don't they do it with sort of a method behind?
Yeah, be more focused. Be more focused.
Well, we're about to do a decent job of catching up in our discussion and the text that we've read these sessions. So we probably are about ready to close for today, but this was a good break from the pure meteorological stuff to get to this issue about the gods and the lightning and thunder. So, I don't know if we're long or short or about right on time today. We might actually be slightly short, but Martin, do you have any general thoughts to add as we think about concluding?
I said everything I could think of for this part of the text.
Okay, Don, any general thoughts?
No, I think that this is a fun way to end an episode, though, on this section. So this is always fun to read.
Yeah, and like I say, next week, I don't know that we have quite as religiously tinted a viewpoint of what's going on with the storms, but basically that it's the same reason for the discussion is that we're going through these meteorological atmospheric phenomena that people wonder about and think may be caused by the gods, and we're just going through and assigning a rational explanation for what's behind them.
And multiple explanations, too. In the spirit of, we don't really know, but it could be this and this and this and this.
Right.
Always come back to the material, physical reasons for things.
Right. Okay, well, I think that's about all that I have to say for today, too. I will repeat what I said a minute ago. If someone were going through the poem and looking for sections which are bitingly sarcastic and aggressive and confrontational and in your face to people who are not of the Epicurean persuasion, this might well be one of the most memorable ones of them. You could probably talk about the end of, I think it's book 2, about the death arguments and the different arguments he puts forward as to why we should not be concerned about the state of being dead.
Mm-hmm. But this one has a real sense of exasperation to it.
It does.
I'd be curious to go back and look at the Latin, but I mean, at least in the translations that I've seen that I'm assuming are fairly correct, just the short, sharp question after question after question after question is an interesting way to really just pound that point home.
Yeah. So I do think Lucretius takes, he's aware, I think, of the volume of information that's being discussed in this book. I guess, he breaks, there's apparently 6 separate sections, and those 6 separate sections are headed by sort of recaps about Epicurus himself and the significance of what we're talking about. And then he goes into a long discussion of something that's very detailed. But I think he does intentionally try to break it up with sections that are more general, like this one. So it's amazing what somebody who is basically insane but has a few lucid moments in the middle of his hallucinations while he's taking that love potion of his that has been reported by the church fathers. It's amazing what somebody as disadvantaged as that can come up with when they.
Wasn't that Saint Jerome? Was it Saint
Jerome?
Oh Lord, I got a problem with Saint Jerome. He does that kind of stuff, but he's also supposedly the patron saint of librarians. So I got this love-hate relationship with Saint Jerome.
Well, okay, then on the question of why the gods destroy their own temples, we'll break for the day and come back next week. So thanks again, and we'll do it next week.
Sounds good.
Bye-bye.
Bye.